There are moments in life when the silence of heaven feels like a storm in your heart, when prayers rise but no answers come when you look up to the sky, and all you see is stillness, and you start to wonder if God is even listening. But what if the silence is not the absence of God? What if it is the gentle voice of heaven teaching you to trust beyond what your eyes can see? Isaiah 3018 says that the Lord longs to be gracious to you, and that he rises to show you compassion, for the Lord is a God of justice, and blessed are all who wait for him. This verse holds a mystery that changes everything. It tells us that waiting is not punishment, it is preparation. It tells us that God delays not because he has forgotten you, but because he is arranging something that cannot be rushed. Waiting is one of the hardest acts of faith, because in waiting you feel powerless, yet in that very powerlessness you find the greatest strength, which is trust. Sometimes God says wait because he is protecting you from what you cannot yet see. Sometimes he says wait because the blessing he has for you is still growing roots under the surface, unseen but alive and strong. The silence of God is never empty. It is full of divine movement. It is full of lessons, full of unseen battles being fought on your behalf, and full of divine timing that will never fail. When God says wait, he is not turning away. He is leaning closer to your spirit. He is whispering, trust me, even here, even now, when nothing makes sense and everything feels slow. God is saying, I am working in ways you will soon understand. There is power in trusting God in the dark, because when the light returns, you will realize he was shaping you for the blessing you prayed, for he was molding your heart to carry what you once only dreamed of. In the silence of waiting, you learn endurance. In the delay, you learn dependence. In the quiet, you learn the strength of stillness, because waiting is not about doing nothing. It is about believing that even when nothing is changing, something holy is still happening. The waiting season is where God teaches you to stand without sight, to believe without signs, and to love him even without answers. The promise of Isaiah 3018 is that God is not only gracious, but he rises to show compassion, which means that even if he seems silent, he is never still. He is preparing to rise in your story, to lift you, to restore you, to honor you in due time. And when that time comes, you will look back and say the wait was worth it, because the silence of God was the place where my faith learned to breathe the deepest. When God says wait, it is not a pause without purpose. It is a divine classroom where faith becomes deeper and roots of trust grow stronger. Though the heart wrestles with confusion and the mind begs for answers, the spirit begins to learn that not hearing from God is not the same as being abandoned by him. Sometimes his silence is a shield protecting you from decisions that would break you too early. Sometimes his delay is mercy, because he knows that receiving the promise too soon could destroy what he is still building inside you. When God says wait, it is an act of love, though it rarely feels that way. The human heart longs for movement, for visible signs of progress, for open doors that prove heaven has heard our prayers. But God's way is not to always show progress. His way is to grow patience, because patience is the soil where faith takes root. It is easy to believe when miracles are visible, but true faith is built when you see nothing yet still believe everything he said. Every second of waiting is shaping your spirit for the promise that will arrive in its appointed time. And Isaiah 3018 reminds us that God rises to show compassion, which means he is not ignoring you. He is preparing to act in perfect justice and perfect love. There is a sacred beauty in the season of silence, because it is there you begin to rely not on what you feel, but on what you know about his character. God does not fail. He does not forget. He does not change. When he tells you to wait, he is weaving together a story that will one day reveal his glory through your endurance. The pain you feel in the waiting is the stretching of your faith. The loneliness you feel in the quiet is the invitation to draw closer to his heart. Waiting refines your motives. It purifies your desires. It teaches you to pray not just for answer, but for alignment with his will, because the goal of waiting is not just to receive, but to become the kind of person who can carry the blessing with humility. When God says wait, he is building that in you. He is forming strength, compassion, wisdom, and perseverance, qualities that only grow in soil of delay. And when the time finally comes for the silence to break and the door to open, you will walk through it, not as the same person who started waiting, but as someone transformed by the fire of trust, someone who has learned that waiting on God is never wasted time, because while you wait, God works, and while you wonder, he weaves a miracle beyond imagination. In the waiting season, it often feels like God has hidden himself behind a wall of silence, and you begin to question if your prayers have any power left. You whisper into the darkness, and all you hear is the echo of your own voice, yet what you cannot see is that heaven is not ignoring you, it is orchestrating something so divine that if you saw the full picture, your heart would fall to its knees in awe. There is no wasted waiting when God is involved, because his silence is not stillness, it is strategy. He is shaping moments, aligning paths, preparing people, and setting divine appointments that will unfold in their perfect time. Isaiah 3018 reminds us that the Lord longs to be gracious, which means he desires to bless you. But because he is a God of justice, he will only do so in the moment that will bring the most glory and the least harm. When you understand that, you begin to see waiting differently. It becomes less of a prison and more of a process, less of a delay and more of a design. Sometimes God withholds an answer because he wants to reveal his presence, not just his power. He wants you to know the giver more than the gift. In the silence, you begin to discover that his presence is more valuable than his promises, because when you have him, you already have enough. There is strength that comes only through surrender, and surrender is what waiting teaches you. It strips away your timelines, your control, and your pride, until all that remains is a quiet trust that says, even if he takes longer than I thought, he is still good. Even if he moves differently than I planned, he is still faithful. And even if he never gives me what I asked, for he has already given me himself. In the wait, you learn that faith is not just believing for something, it is believing in someone. You learn to anchor your heart, not in the outcome, but in his nature. And when you finally stop fighting the silence and start resting in it, you begin to see that his peace flows even when answers do not come, because peace was never tied to answers, it was tied to his presence. Every delay is proof that he is still guiding. Every unanswered prayer is proof that he is still listening. Every quiet season is proof that he is still loving, because his silence is never rejection, it is redirection. It is a sacred invitation to draw nearer and listen with your heart, because sometimes the whisper of God can only be heard when everything else goes quiet. When you are walking through the long corridors of waiting, it can feel like time has stopped, and your life is standing still while others move forward. Yet this is the very moment when heaven is doing its most intricate work within you. Waiting is never stillness in the eyes of God. It is movement of the unseen kind. It is the holy labor of transformation, where faith matures and hope becomes unshakable. There are things that can only grow in silence, the way roots grow deep into the soil, before a tree ever touches the sky. Sometimes God says wait, because he is building roots in your soul before he lets your dream bloom. Waiting forces you to let go of the illusion of control. It exposes what you really believe about God's goodness. When prayers are answered, it is easy to shout, he is faithful, but when prayers linger and answers delay, that is when your faith is proven real. Isaiah 3018 whispered that the Lord longs to be gracious, which means he is leaning toward you. Even in the quiet, he is rising to show compassion. Even when your heart feels ignored, every tear you shed in waiting is seen. Every sigh is heard. Every hope is noted by the one who writes purpose into delay. It is in the wait that God tests your endurance, but also reveals his tenderness. He teaches you to rest in his promises when you have no proof. He teaches you to praise before you see the answer. He teaches you to serve in obscurity before he brings you into visibility. Because the wait is the place where your character is built before your calling is revealed. Many people lose heart in this season because they mistake quietness for absence. But silence is not the absence of God's hand, it is the shaping of his plan. And when that plan unfolds, you will see why it had to take time, because quick blessings can crumble, but prepared blessings endure. You must trust that every closed door, every delayed dream, every unanswered prayer is part of a bigger mercy. And one day you will thank him not only for what he gave, but for what he withheld. For a while waiting humbles you, it refines your trust, it empties you of pride, such that when the answer comes, you no longer worship the outcome, you worship the one who made you wait, to see that his heart was always enough. When you learn to wait well, you learn to love God for who he is, not just for what he gives, and that is the deepest kind of faith. There comes a moment in the waiting when you no longer count the days, because your heart begins to understand that time is not the measure of God's faithfulness. When he says wait, he is not asking you to sit in sorrow. He is asking you to stay in surrender. Waiting is not a punishment, it is a posture. It is the sacred stillness between promise and fulfillment, where your faith becomes unshakable, and your heart learns to rest in his plan. Isaiah 3018 tells us that the Lord rises to show compassion, and that means the waiting will not last forever. Every delay has an expiration date, every silence has a purpose, and every tear has a reason. You may not see it yet, but heaven has already marked the moment of your breakthrough. And when that moment comes, you will see why the wait was necessary, because the same God who allowed the delay will be the same God who fulfills the promise perfectly in His timing. The waiting season feels like walking through fog. You can only see a few steps ahead, yet every step teaches you to depend not on what you see, but on who leads you, and that is where intimacy with God grows strongest. When you stop asking how long and start saying, "Lead me, Lord," your heart begins to shift from anxiety to trust, from control to surrender, and from fear to peace, because waiting reveals what your faith is really built on. If your peace depends on answers, you will break in the silence. But if your peace depends on God's presence, you will stand no matter how long it takes. The waiting season is where you discover the quiet strength that comes from worshiping in uncertainty, from thanking Him while tears fall, and from believing when there is no visible reason left to believe. In that sacred space, your faith is being refined like gold. Every disappointment becomes a lesson. Every unanswered prayer becomes a testimony in progress. Every delay becomes a doorway to deeper trust. The miracle may not come when you want it, but it will come right on time, because God is not working according to your clock. He is working according to your calling, and the deeper the calling, the longer the preparation. So, when He says wait, know that He is setting the stage for something that will carry eternal weight, something so complete that it will silence every fear and every doubt you ever had. Waiting is not about losing time, it is about gaining strength, about being molded in the hands of a perfect Creator who sees beyond the moment into the masterpiece He is forming within you. And now, as you reach the end of this season, you begin to realize that the wait itself was the answer all along, because in the silence you found the voice of God. Not in thunder, but in stillness. You learned that His timing is not delay but design, and that every quiet moment was a divine brush stroke painting faith upon your heart. Isaiah 3018 declares that the Lord longs to be gracious and rises to show compassion. And now you understand that this rising was happening all along. Even when you felt forgotten, you were being formed. Even when you felt abandoned, you were being anointed. The silence you feared became the sanctuary that healed you. The delay that frustrated you became the discipline that strengthened you. Waiting is not wasted, it is worship, because every second of surrender is a declaration that you trust God more than your plans, and that is the faith that moves heaven. When God finally speaks, when the door opens and the promise arrives, you will not just receive the blessing, you will recognize the purpose, because you will see how every tear, every prayer, and every moment of silence was part of His greater mercy. There is no lost time with God. Every wait is holy, every delay is divine, every quiet season is filled with the sound of heaven preparing something beautiful for you. And when it comes, it will come suddenly, and it will make sense. The tears will be worth it, the lessons will be worth it, and the silence will no longer hurt, because it taught you to hear Him without noise and to love Him without condition. So if you are waiting now, hold on, do not give up. The Lord is not done. He will rise to show you compassion in the perfect moment. And when He does, you will see that the wait was not a denial. It was the doorway to destiny, the place where your faith became real and your trust became unbreakable. The silence of God was never a wall. It was a whisper saying, "I am still here, I am still working, and I am still faithful." So keep waiting, keep believing, keep trusting, because His promise still stands, and His timing will always be perfect forever, and always.